I hope everyone had a wonderful and happy holiday break, spending time with their loved ones. Now it's time to get back to the action. This Saturday, January 11th, is UFC Vegas 101. This will be my full card breakdown and prediction. Timestamps will be in the description. Let's get right into it. In the first fight, we have Nurullo Aliev versus Joe Solecki. Nurullo is 24 years old, 9-0, coming off a decision win 1 year ago. Nerullo lands 2.5 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 0.46. He has a 22% finish rate. Joe Solecki is 31 years old, 13-5, 2-3 in his last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 7 months ago. Joe Solecki lands 1.98 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 1.77. He has a 69% finish rate. Nerullo's a wrestler from Tajikistan. Joe Solecki's more of a BJJ practitioner. He does have 8 subs on his record. The grappling between these two should be interesting. Nerullo uses his grappling to control his opponents, and Joe Solecki wants to be on the ground. Ultimately, I'm going to go with Nerullo, as I think the short notice for Joe Solecki isn't going to do him well, and I think Nerullo's wrestling will be able to negate Joe Solecki's BJJ. In the next fight, we have Fatima Klein versus Victoria Dudikova. Klein is 24 years old, 6-1, 4-1 in her last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 5 months ago. Klein lands 2.6 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 2.67. She has a 43% finish rate, and she's a -800 favorite. Dudakova is 25 years old, 8-1, 4-1 in her last 5 fights, coming off a split decision loss 5 months ago. Dudakova lands 3.14 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.77. She has a 67% finish rate, and she's a +550 underdog. We have 2 young, up-and-coming strawweights in this matchup. Kline drew Jasmine Jazz the Vicious in her UFC debut and lost. I mean, that's a very tough introduction to the UFC. Dudakova does have 4 submission wins, so I definitely think she can catch Kline in a submission if she's not careful. There's not really much else to go off of in this fight, so I'm just going to go for Fatima Klein. I guess we'll see what happens. In the next fight, we have Magomed. Yeah, I'm not gonna mess that last name up. Versus Bruno Lopez. I apologize. Magomed is 31 years old, 9-0, coming off a decision win 6 months ago. Magomed lands 3.3 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 1.37. He has a 67% finish rate. Lopez is 31 years old, 13-1, 4-1 in his last 5 fights, coming off a KO win off Dana White's Contender Series 4 months ago. Lopez lands 3.69 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 4.07. He has a 79% finish rate, and he's a +150 underdog. Magomed is a very well-rounded fighter. He mixes it up well. He's not afraid to exchange on the feet, and when his opponents get comfortable, he will shoot for the takedown, get them down to the ground, and he'll mix in some ground and pound as well. He also averages 5.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. Lopez is making his UFC debut. He's a striker, but he also is a dangerous submission threat. He has 6 KOs and 5 submission wins in his resume, so this guy's very dangerous no matter where the fight is. I think this could be a fun fight. Lopez is going to bring the fight to Magomed, and Magomed is going to have to fight off his back foot. I see both guys having success on the feet, but once Lopez starts to get a little comfortable, Magomed is going to shoot that takedown, get the fight on the ground, and mix in some ground and pound. I'm going to go with Magomed. I wouldn't be surprised if Lopez were to get a finish inside the distance. I think this fight's very competitive, and I think the underdog's very live here. In the next fight, we have Ernesta Karechkaite versus Nicolle Caliari. Sorry if I messed those names up. Ernesta's 26 years old, 5-1-1. She's 4-0-1 in her last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 8 months ago. Ernesta lands 7.9 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 6.9. She has a 29% finish rate, and she's a -230 favorite. Caliari is 28 years old, 8-2, 4-1 in her last 5 fights, coming off a submission win 3 months ago off Dana White's Contender Series. Caliari lands 1.89 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.16. She has an 80% finish rate, and she's a plus 190 underdog. This is another matchup of two young up-and-coming flyweights. And the first thing you're going to notice is the massive size difference. Ernesta will have a 6-inch height advantage and a 9-inch reach advantage. I know Caliari's a finisher with that 80% finish rate, but I just think the size and the length is going to be too much for her to overcome. And then on top of it, her output is so low, whereas Ernesta's output is very high. I think it's just going to be too much for her to overcome in her UFC debut. In the next fight, we have Preston Parsons versus Jacobe Smith. Preston Parsons is 29 years old, 11-5, 2-3 in his last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 5 months ago. Parsons lands 3.5 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.12. He has a 56% finish rate. Jacobe Smith is 28 years old, 9-0, coming off a KO win from Dana White's Contender Series 3 months ago. Jacobe Smith looked good in his Dana White Contender Series fight, used some solid grappling to get in position and to get a very nice ground and pound finish. He has a 78% finish rate, so this guy definitely looks to end the fight early. I think Smith will have a speed and athleticism advantage here. I do think Preston is crafty and will give Smith some issues early in the fight. But ultimately, for me, I'm going to go with Jacobe Smith. The next fight, we have Thiago Moises versus Trey Ogden. Thiago Moises is 29 years old, 18-8, 3-2 in his last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 6 months ago. Moises lands 2.47 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 4.14. He has a 46% finish rate and is a minus 175 favorite. Trey Ogden is 35 years old, 18-6, 3-2 in his last 5 fights, and he's coming off a decision win 5 months ago. Ogden lands 3.38 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.46. He has a 46% finish rate, and he's a plus 145 underdog. Thiago Moises is only 29 years old, and it feels like he's been fighting in the UFC forever. I do think this will be a close fight. I think Thiago Moises has very good BJJ, but Ogden is also a BJJ practitioner, so I think those two things will cancel each other out. I see the fight taking place primarily on the feet, but we will get some fun grappling exchanges. On the feet, I see it being kind of slow as Moises can fight off the back foot. I'm curious to see who's going to lead the dance. I'm going to go with Moises by decision. I like the youth being on his side. Moises has also fought the better competition. I think that's going to be the difference. In the next fight, we have Marco Tullio versus Ihor Potieria. Tullio is 30 years old, 12-1, 5-0 in his last 5 fights, coming off a KO win 4 months ago on Dana White's Contender Series. Tullio lands 3.2 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 2.78. He has a 69% finish rate and is a minus 450 favorite. Ihor Potieria is 28 years old, 20-7 his last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 2 months ago. Potieria lands 5.13 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 4.72. He has a 56% finish rate, and he's a plus 350 underdog. I really think Ihor Potieria is fighting to stay in the UFC. He's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Hopefully he comes out a bit more motivated and aggressive. He will have a 3-inch height advantage, but I don't think he really scares many guys in the division with his power. I do think his cardio is a bit questionable. I've seen him melt in a couple fights where he just gassed out pretty early in the fight. And I think he's going to come in with that excitement and a lot of that nervous energy to start because he's going to want to make a statement with his performance. Potieria is definitely due for a win, but I'm going to go with Marco Tullio here. In the next fight, we have Jose Johnson versus Felipe Bunes. Jose Johnson is 29 years old, 16-9, 3-2 in his last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 6 months ago. Johnson lands 2.8 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 1.64. He has a 44% finish rate, and he's a minus 225 favorite. Felipe Bunes is 35 years old, 13-7, 3-2 in his last 5 fights, coming off a KO loss 11 months ago. Bunes lands 5.25 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 8.72. He has a 50% finish rate, and he's a plus 180 underdog. For starters, Johnson is massive at flyweight as he's 6 feet tall. He'll also enjoy a 3-inch reach advantage. Bunes gets hit a lot, as I stated in the stats, but he definitely brings a fight to his opponents. Jones is a bit more calculated, and that's why his output is a lot less. But I think the range and the reach is going to be a major problem for Bunes. And then on top of it, he's 35, fighting at flyweight, and that's just not good at such a low weight class. For me, I'm going to go with the youth and the size of Jose Johnson. In the next fight, we have Punahele Soriano versus Udos Met. Soriano's 32 years old, 10-4, 2-3 in his last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 6 months ago. Soriano lands 3.96 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.88. He has a 57% finish rate and is a plus 165 underdog. Udos Met is 31 years old, 10-2, 3-2 in his last 5 fights, coming off a KO win 8 months ago. Medic lands 5.51 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.18, has an 83% finish rate, and is a minus 200 favorite. I think this will be a super fun fight for as long as it lasts. I do think Medic is the more technical and the crisper striker. Both guys need a win to get some momentum going in their career. I see both guys having success on the feet as they're both strikers, and they are both going to stand right in front of each other and trade. So fans are definitely in for a treat. This has potential fight of the night implications. I'm going to go with Udos Medic. I think he's a little bit cleaner of a striker, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this one end it early. In the next fight, we have Christian Rodriguez versus Austin Bashi. Christian Rodriguez is 27 years old, 11-2, 4-1 in his last 5 fights, coming off a submission loss 5 months ago. Rodriguez lands 3.65 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 2.56. He has a 54% finish rate, and he's a plus 195 underdog. Austin Bashi is 23 years old, 13-0, coming off a submission win 4 months ago on Dana White's Contender Series. Bashi lands 2.67 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 2.3. He has a 62% finish rate and is a minus 235 favorite. Well, Christian Rodriguez has been in this position before, fighting an undefeated, up-and-coming, hot prospect. So this is nothing new for him. He's a very complete fighter and has skills wherever the fight takes place. Bashi drew a tough matchup for his UFC debut. He's a wrestler and very grappling heavy. He's very strong. Rodriguez dealt with Raul Rosas Jr., a very strong grappler in his own right. This fight is up a weight class at featherweight, whereas that fight took place at bantamweight. I think Bashi's strength is going to really show in this fight, and I think it's going to be enough to where he can get some takedowns and control Rodriguez on the ground. I can see Rodriguez stuffing some takedowns, keeping this on the feet, and potentially piecing Bashi up on the feet. Bashi will definitely need to use his size and strength relentlessly and just put the pressure on Christian Rodriguez and not let him dictate the pace of the fight. Give me Bashi, but Rodriguez is a very live dog here, and I may change my mind. If you're going Christian Rodriguez, tell me how and why in the comments below. You can't convince me. In the next fight, we have Chris Curtis versus Roman Kopylov. Chris Curtis is 37 years old, 31-11, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. Chris Curtis lands 5.76 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 6.16. He has a 43% finish rate, and he's a plus 210 underdog. Roman Kopylov is 33 years old, 13-3, 4-1 in his last 5 fights, coming off a decision win 7 months ago. Kopylov lands 4.66 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 4.06. He has a 69% finish rate and is a minus 265 favorite. This should be a striker's delight right here. Chris Curtis primarily uses his boxing and that Philly shell defense from the southpaw stance. Kopylov is also a southpaw, but he's a much more complete striker, has very good boxing, uses good footwork, has good feints, and also has really good kicks as well. This fight could potentially be fight of the night, but it also has the potential of being a bit slow, depending how each guy goes about it. Both guys will have success on the feet, but with Chris Curtis only using his boxing, it's not as many threats for Roman Kopylov to worry about. This will definitely be a fun one, but I'm going to go with Roman Kopylov here. In the next fight, we have Abdul Razak Al-Hassan versus Cesar Almeida. Razak Al-Hassan is 39 years old, 12-6, 2-3 in his last 5 fights, coming off a no contest 5 months ago. Razak Al-Hassan lands 3.62 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.97. He has a 67% finish rate and is a plus 244 underdog. Cesar Almeida is 36 years old, 6-1, 4-1 in his last 5 fights, coming off a decision win 2 months ago. Significant strikes per minute, absorbs 2.18. He has a 57% finish rate and is a minus 300 favorite. In this matchup, we're gonna have the classic brawler and Razak Al-Hassan versus the credentialed kickboxer Almeida. This is going to be interesting as Almeida's a kickboxer, but he's been in the UFC, he just lives in the clinch and doesn't really show off his striking much. Al-Hassan has big power in his hands, but he's very wild and he tries to land with hooks and overhands. So he definitely leaves himself open to get caught. I think Al-Hassan will have a tough time hitting Almeida clean, and Almeida will get into the clinch with Al-Hassan and maybe even get some takedowns. Al-Hassan definitely has that one-punch KO power, but I'm going to go with Almeida. Al-Hassan can definitely win the fight. In the co-main event, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Carlton Harris. Santiago Ponzinibbio is 38 years old, 29-8, 1-4 in his last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 5 months ago. Santiago Ponzinibbio lands 4.74 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 4.55. He has a 58% finish rate, and this is a pick'em fight. Carlton Harris is 37 years old, 19-6, 3-2 in his last 5 fights, coming off a KO loss 7 months ago. Carlton Harris lands 3.18 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 2.66. He has a 44% finish rate. So this is the veteran matchup on the card. Both guys are coming to the end of their careers, and it's just one of those fights where we're matching up guys to have a fun fight. Ponzinibbio's been fighting tougher competition, in my opinion, and he's been fighting a little bit longer. Ponzinibbio is starting to slow down, though. That is something we are starting to notice, but he's still a very crafty fighter. Harris will have some success, and Ponzi will have to weather the storm a bit in this fight. Getting past that 3-inch reach disadvantage will be tough for Ponzinibbio, but I think he's crafty enough to figure out a way. I'm going to go with Ponzinibbio in this fight. Before we get into the main event, like the video and subscribe to the channel. In the main event, we have Mackenzie Dern versus Amanda Ribas. Mackenzie Dern is 31 years old, 14-5, 2-3 in her last 5 fights, coming off a decision win 5 months ago. Mackenzie Dern lands 3.42 significant strikes per minute, absorbs. She has a 37% finish rate, and she's a plus 175 underdog. Amanda Ribas is 31 years old, 12-5, 2-3 in her last 5 fights, coming off a decision loss 9 months ago. Amanda Ribas lands 4.63 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.4. She has a 41% finish rate, and she's a minus 210 favorite. I think Ribas will be the slightly better striker. Dern will definitely want this fight on the ground for sure, as she does all her fights. Ribas is a competent grappler and has 4 submission wins on her resume. Dern is pretty much just turned into a zombie in her last 2 fights and just walks forward, disregarding anything coming at her. I can see Dern getting a takedown at some point, even though Ribas does have that 85% takedown defense. The fact that this is a 5-round fight, I think at some point this fight has got to end up on the ground. I do think Mackenzie Dern has a slight grappling advantage with the BJJ. I do think this is going to be a very ugly fight. A lot of clinching. But for me, I'm going to go with the underdog and take Mackenzie Dern by submission. Let me know whether you agree or disagree in the comments below. Questions, comments, feedback are always appreciated. And as always, until next time.